Installment 2 of the $10 pocket knife battle. Did you know that you could get an American-made knife, pocket knife, for 10 bucks? I did not know this. This is a new knife. I've never seen this before. New knife for me, at least. I'm sure it's been around for a while. However, upon closer inspection, with global materials. So, let's see. They imported the parts, assembled it here, called it Made in America. I don't know, kind of a gray zone there for me. Probably not truly made in America, but it was a pocket knife for under $10. And let's see how this little Stanley pocket knife holds up. It is definitely a different design, completely different than anything else. It is not your standard pocket knife. It has a very poorly centered, very thin, replaceable blade on this pocket knife. You can see it is in that same type as your old school, I mean, everyone knows this Stanley knife. Everyone's got one of these in their shop. It cuts real easily. Replace your blades. They're dirt cheap. In fact, up on here, I have the replacement blades. Now, these replacement blades are not quite as cheap, and I think they're about $10 for a 2-pack. So, in this, if you ever want to replace your blade, it's half the cost of the entire knife. I feel like I'd rather just buy a whole new knife at that point. But here it is. The lockup is with this plastic pull tab here. So it's all locked right now when you pull it out. And if you want to put it back in, you pull this bottom and then you are able to retract the blade back into the handle. This is kind of a cool knife because it is incredibly light. It's all metal and it's very thin, as is the blade. The blade is very thin. Now, the durability of this, I'm not entirely sure how well it's going to hold up because its locking mechanism is completely plastic. However, so is this guy. This entire little thumb push stud here is all plastic. However, this knife can take an absolute beating. Will this be able to handle the same type of abuse? I don't know. You have a lot more leverage. A lot more leverage. However, just like the other more traditional kind of X-Acto-y knife, not X-Acto knife, but utility knife, the bearing surfaces, at least in the cut, are actually metal. So it hits up against the back of the handle here, and then it pivots on its metal screw. To replace the blade, pretty easy. You unscrew here. This pops right off. Actually doesn't pop off completely. Kind of pivots out of the way. You can see here it will pivot up and then you can put in a new blade. It does not have the capability to store blades in the handle like the other one. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It makes it, I think, much more compact and small. The cutting surface on this is tiny. I don't think it's even 2 inches. Let's see. Deployed. Yeah, it's just over 1.5 inches. So you have a very, very small cutting surface on this. Very small, especially for the comparison of the handle size. This is essentially a full-size handle. You've got 1.5 inches of blade length to mess around with. Interesting little knife. Interesting. Where to score this on my criteria here? Aesthetics. Aesthetics is hard because it's such a utilitarian design. It's not a bad-looking knife. It just doesn't look like anything else that would kind of resemble a traditional pocket knife. The finish is very utilitarian, almost a powder-coated steel. Lots of kind of hard edges. Lots of just mars. They're not really mars, they're just imperfections. Not great care went into the assembly and production of this knife. Definitely made at a price point. Not necessarily a bad thing because it lets you get it for that $10. Aesthetics and initial quality, I'm going to give this a 5. It's just wonky. It's not a great looking knife. But there's something utilitarian about it that just makes it work. So we'll give it a 5. It's not an ugly duckling, but it's not winning any beauty contests. And its quality, it leaves a bit to desired. Have a good bit of of blade play here, both horizontally, up and down, and just in every single direction this thing moves and wiggles about. Now it doesn't shake, but you can definitely move it around. So we'll give this a 5 for category number 1. Stanley. It just says pocket knife. The 10-049. 10-04985. Factory edge and sharpness. Now I think that's where this thing is going to really win out, because I know that not X-Acto knives, I keep saying that. Utility knives are just razor sharp, and I expect the same performance out of this. You can see it has a very shallow saber grind with a very tiny secondary bevel there. And yeah, it is absolutely razor sharp. Let's get a piece of paper. Yeah, this is impressively sharp. I mean, it doesn't take any pressure, and it can just dance around this paper. No, it cuts very well. This paper is a little damp. It does very well. I've seen sharper blades out there, but this thing cuts exceptionally well. I'm going to give this a 9. It doesn't get too much sharper from the factory. This thing cuts like a laser. Edge retention on this little Stanley pocket knife. I've got the same piece of cardboard here. I'm going to go 3 strips. Now, I would expect that this steel would hold a slightly better edge than the Schrade Imperial, but let's see. One. Oopsie. Two. Again, I'm trying to vary the location of the cutting edge at the moment, just so I get the whole blade in there. And 3. Definitely glides through that stuff very easily. Let's see what that did. Just looking at the blade, there are no marks like the Schrade had going on the actual flat of the blade. So I'm guessing that this is going to be a harder steel than what was used in the Schrade. And it lost some cutting, especially down here towards the handle where I was cutting a little bit more. It doesn't just stick into your nail, it kind of comes off a little bit. I don't know if this is going to cut paper. Let's see. Got the same piece of paper here, but it does. I think that also has to do with the edge geometry here, because it's such a thin blade. And you can have these knives just completely dull, but it still is going to cut because it's just such a thin blade. And that's definitely what's going on here, but it's working in its favor. It's still cutting paper, not as easily as it did before, but it is doing it. Edge retention on this. Not perfect, it definitely lost some. However, it fared much better than the previous one. I'll give that a 5. Very average. Ergonomics of this knife are surprisingly pretty good. You wouldn't look at it and say it's going to be a comfortable knife, but there's just no hot spots on it. So when you get it out and you get it in your hand, now it's a little bit slippery, especially here. There's just your hand. I mean, you can see a little bit of traction right here. And that's not where I hold the knife. If I'm doing a pinch grip, I'm going to pinch grip this direction, not this one. I would love to see this texturing, although it's still pretty slippery texturing. However, it would have been much better, in my opinion, to be on the spine here of the handle. It's not an uncomfortable knife. Now, if you squeeze really hard here, your finger kind of goes into this sharp edge, which isn't too bad. But if you're actually going to work with this knife, you can work with this knife for a long time, and it's not going to blister out your hand. It's a pretty comfortable knife to work with. Not too bad at all. No hot spots, pretty decent ergos. I'll give that a 7. It's not like the most comfortable knife ever, but definitely something you could work with for a long time and not have any sort of fatigue on your hand. Let's see how easily this knife gets back to a very hair-popping, paper-shaving edge. Now, one thing I'm going to implement in this is a quick hone. We'll see if we can get just the edge back with a ceramic rod that's made for sharpening. So I'll do 10 on one side, 10 on the other, and then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Quick hand hone here, hand strop, and let's see what that does for the paper test. Yeah, brought it back. Not quite to where it was. But it is now easier to go through this paper than right off the cardboard. Not too bad. Let's see if I can get any sharper using the diamond block. This has a very shallow grind. I'm starting right at the 600 because it really didn't dull that much. Don't want to establish a new bevel. This is almost like sharpening a Scandi knife. Not my favorite to do. Alright, and then let's get just a little bit of that micro bevel back. And see where that got us. It's sharper. Doesn't just easily glide over your fingernail anymore. It wants to dig in. Yeah, it's pretty easy to resharpen. Not too bad. Pretty easy knife to sharpen. We'll give that an 8. So the first test again we have here, our piece of juniper. And I'm just going to whack it about 10 times and see how it does. That's weird. It definitely had some play when you hit that. You could kind of feel it wiggle around a little. But I don't think it's any worse for wear. The edge on it. This thin blade survived. Pretty unscathed. I'm having a camera in my... Here we go. Still pretty sharp. Alright, drop test. Let's see how it does. 10 drops. By the end of this, I'm going to be a mumbly peg master. Let's open this guy up. We'll do a couple tip drops again from that kind of 3-foot-ish range. 1, 2. One on the back here where the lock is. 3. Do another one there. 4. Alright, mumbly peg time. 5. Over rotating every time. 6. Let me get this. There it is. 7. Alright, another mumbly peg one off your elbow. Yeah, 8. Off your hat. At least through the head, but I'm not quite that brave. Oh, 9. Alright, last one. Over your back. There we go. Mumbly Peg Master, I'm telling you. 10. Let's go see how it did. So how did the Stanley pocket knife handle the Mumbly Peg of Destruction? Now I think a weak point of this knife here is kind of this plastic locking lugs that come out. They're mostly protected by the bottom of the outside of the scales here. Kind of this metal frame, not really scales. But on the side they are exposed. Luckily they fared very well. No damage here. No scrapes on the paint even. Granted, I know I'm dropping it into wood and not concrete or anything like that. However, I think this on the outside handled very well. How did the blade do? Ooh, Ooh that's quality. I think it's got some dirt in there. Definitely needs to be cleaned up a smidge. Blade, I don't see any real damage. Tip is still nice and sharp. You can see where it's been stamped out here. But there's no bends. It handled hitting the wood 10 times like a champ. Edge is still completely there. Not bad. I think this actually handled the durability test very well. There is a little bit more play. This wiggles back and forth a little bit more. So I can't give this a 10 or a 9. There's some gunk in there too, isn't there? The blade is looser. So on the outside, it handled it very well. Hitting the piece of wood, I could feel it kind of start to play every time I hit. So I'm gonna give this a 6 because it definitely loosened up the action here. Not quite as tight as it once was. Brings us to deployment speed, and this has got to be the slowest deploying knife in existence. To retract the blade, you need to use 2 hands. Oh man, it is full of gunk, and this blade is not happy. You have to pull down, and then with your other hand, you have to close the blade. So it is a 2-handed retraction. It is a 2-handed deployment. Oh, that is not a noise you want to hear from your knife. Just a squeaky wheel. It doesn't have a clip for pocket carry. It doesn't have a hole for a lanyard. This has got to be about as bad as it gets for deployment speed. And I was kind of jumping into carry comfort. But deployment speed, not great. Out of your pocket, you're going to have to fish this out. And then you're going to have to use 2 hands to open it. You're going to have to use 2 hands to close it. Not great. Deployment speed is a 1. Carry comfort. It's not got any sharp edges on it, so it's not going to be quite as bad as the previous knife. Where this one, it's a little bit thicker. These edges are actually sharp, and they will kind of rub the inside of your leg the wrong way. This one doesn't have any sharp angles or edges like that. So I'm still going to give this just a 3 for carry comfort. It is not my preferred method of carry. It is nice and thin. Not too bad, but not great either. You know what? We'll give it a 4. We gave this one a 3. Gave this a 3. This is thinner. It's lighter. It doesn't have any hot spots on it like that for carrying. So we'll give it a 4 for carry comfort. Pride of ownership. I mean, you kind of have that pride of being a U.S. manufactured knife. However, that's completely taken, in my opinion, by this with global materials. So is this actually made in America? Or did we ship all these Chinese parts over here, assembled it here, and then called it made in the USA? I don't know. That's a gray area that I don't like to play around in. So pride of ownership, this thing is kind of ugly. It is. If you pull this out, no one's going to be like, oh, wow, he's got a cool pocket knife. Nobody. Now, the last one reviewed, like, it's got that old-timey feel. It's kind of got some cool aesthetics. This does not have that at all. Pride of ownership. It is Stanley. You got that. You actually at least have a real name on here. But, man, I'm going to have to give this a 3 for pride of ownership. Not very good. Now, your value for your money. This is a tough one. This is a tough one for me. Because $10 is not a lot of money these days. But this is not a whole lot of knife. It's not bad. It's very much a utility knife, more so than a pocket knife, in my opinion. And this is kind of the pocket knife battle, the cheap budget pocket knife battle. And honestly, this is not a pocket knife I would ever choose. So value for your money on this little blade that's just paper thin. You're not going to get a lot of life out of this. The replacement blades are expensive, half the price of the entire knife itself. Now, if these replacement blades were as cheap as their traditional utility knife blades, I might think it was a better value, but since these blades are kind of expensive at $5 each, at least on Amazon, I had to buy this one on Amazon. I can't give it a high value. I'm going to give it I mean, it's still a cutting knife. I'm going to give it a 3 as well. It's not going to break on you. It is pretty durable. So you're getting a decent cutting blade for your money, but it's not what I would ever want to spend my $10 on when there are much, much better options out there. And the grand total for the Stanley 10-049 comes out to 51, which is about right. The last one got a 57, and I way, way, way prefer the previous knife, that Trade Imperial, over this. It's still not a horrendous knife, so it's not a complete 0 on this scale. You get a American brand, you get a decent cutting edge, the ability to easily swap out blades or sharpen if you want to, and it's got a uniqueness about it, no doubt about it. It is a different type of pocket knife. It's thin, which is kind of cool. Not for pocket carry, but maybe put this out in a bug out bag. It's got a stainless edge, so it shouldn't rust on you too much. It's got good corrosion resistance. Not bad, 51. It scored very high in its factory edge and sharpness. It scored high in its ease of sharpening. It's relatively ergonomic. It scored very low in its deployment speed, pride of ownership, carry comfort. There we go. If you'd like to buy this knife, the link will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, guys. We got a few more knives to get through, quite a few. Again, if you have any ideas for a $10 knife or below that you think is going to win this battle, let me know in the comments. Thanks, guys. Take care.